real speakers, real coaches, real investors, real companies. No matter your destiny, all roads lead to Real Leaders Unite.
You threw me off when you said it was somebody who was incredible. I thought you were talking about Simon or John or Mark. So I actually sat back down. Whew.
I don't like Simon.
Okay, pressure's off. Actually, when I was asked to give this talk, I thought, what do we say to literally people who are winning awards for being impact leaders? Especially when there's a party afterwards. And so I came up with a number of one-liners that I considered doing and then just mic dropping and walking off. I thought Kevin might have been disappointed, but I thought you might like to see some of my brainstorming. First one, how about this? Eat kale, hug a tree, change the world. Mic drop. Be kind, recycle, occasionally wear capes. Okay, sometimes I found crazy brainstorming leads to good ones, so this is the one I settled on. Impact leaders, like superheroes with less spandex. So you can go home, you can tell your colleagues and your kids, you're kind of like a superhero, just a little less spandex, but the cape gave me that idea. So I am happy to be here. Kevin asked me to talk a little bit about why I do this work. And that generated kind of some normal speech type things. And I was telling my dinner table colleagues that I actually decided to do something different on this. I'm going to be pretty personal, and I'm nervous. I give a lot of talks. I'm not usually nervous. I'm nervous because I'm going to be vulnerable. I can feel it already. I'll tell you, I might even cry. I can kind of feel it. I don't know if that's nervousness or I'm going to be talking about my mom. I'm going to be talking about my mom and my grandpa and some other things, and almost dying. So to help with that, will you do something for me? Can we breathe together? Did you know that this science is finding now that when people meditate together, their hearts start to beat together? That choirs, their hearts beat at the same frequency, the same rhythm. Can we do 3 rounds of breathing? Is that okay? That'll help me feel grounded. We'll do in through the nose for 5, hold for the box breathing, hold for 5, out for 5, hold for 5, okay? Okay, so in through the nose for 5. Hold. And out through the mouth for 5. If you've done this before, you can close your eyes. If you haven't, you can close your eyes. In through the nose. Hold. Out through the mouth. Hold. Last one, in through the nose. Hold. She's feeling it. Out through the mouth. Thank you. I do feel better. Namaste. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to start with 3 stories. I'm going to tell a little bit about my grandfather, a little bit about my mom, and then quite a bit more about myself. And some of you know part of my story. Some of the things I'm going to talk about I've never talked about publicly. And then I'm going to, from there, talk about 3 leadership topics, 3 leadership principles that have been on my mind for the last little while. And I'm hoping that you'll feel something or think something or hear something that I don't say. So pay attention to that. Pay attention to the inner voice, the intuition we were talking about, Mona. Listen inside, and hopefully you'll hear something far more important than anything that I would actually say. And I've even written a poem for us at the end. Okay, so to get started, more pop. More pop is I can't remember the technical word, when you take 2 words meaning 2 different things in 2 different languages and put it together. More from Danish meaning mother, and then pop from the English side. So this is my mother's father. Thank you. Exactly. Would be more far, or if it were Danish. So this is more pop. Yeah. That's where I get all my dashing good looks. So that's in his UNRWA uniform, UN Refugee Association. He spent part of the war smuggling Jewish families out of Germany and other places, and then after the war, smuggling out of from behind the Iron Curtain. And people would, he was an operative, like a real life, like in trains at night and all that kind of stuff. And he would notice sometime after trips that there would be something in his pocket, and he'd reach in and find a handful of diamonds with a note. Keep these safe, I'll find you if I make it. Or they'd explicitly give him all their gold and say, I know I can trust you, put this somewhere and I'll come find you afterwards. And so he just opened up safe deposit boxes and people found him. Not everybody, but a lot of people came and found him afterwards. And he'd take him to the bank and open it up and hand them the things. Pretty amazing. He went from there, he was a speech writer at the Library of Congress, worked for a congressman or a senator named John Kennedy. And then ended up working with this same Kennedy to help start the Peace Corps. And so he oversaw Asia for the Peace Corps. And so my mom grew up in Malaysia and the Philippines. And so I heard stories about that type of work and living in those areas. This is all context on the why I do this work. And then he also led the Cuban refugee resettlement program in Florida after with Castro, different things with Castro. So an amazing person, and he would always say, try to do as much good as you can. Just try to do as much good as you can, whatever you're doing. So there's a little bit of that. Next, my mom. There she is, Misha Davis. I'm going to give away part of the punchline. She ended up passing away at age 62. Ironically from ovarian cancer after having 8 kids, and you'll get to see a classic 1980s picture of us all at some point. But she was always engaged in the community, always. She was a part of a group that started a welcome club for immigrants and refugees that came to our town of Northern California, Davis. And so some of my friends growing up had come from Russia when they could get out and had to back when they had to defect to get out, et cetera. She was always taking care of people. Somebody, a woman who became friends of the family named Benji, she was a homeless woman. My mom met her because she ran into her accidentally in the Bank of America parking lot with the car. Knocked her over. And instead of sitting there for an ambulance, my mom put her in the car and took her to the hospital, where the next day we all came as a family to visit her, et cetera. 3 days later when she got out, she came to dinner at our house. So we always, Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner, any big dinner like that, many Sunday dinners, we had somebody like that from the community, or somebody who's an older woman whose husband had passed away or whatnot in our home. There we are, 8 kids. You can see I definitely did not have my grandpa's looks at that stage. Here's another one. I put this on here. This was I think a holiday card one year or something. We were very active. We were a very active family. You can see from the different things going on. You can imagine carpooling and getting people to practice and to whatever else. And we didn't have a huge house. And sometimes, I know this is going to seem totally weird. How many have kids? Anybody have kids? Most people have kids. Okay. So those of you who have your own children, you'll think this is very strange. Sometimes our house got messy. A little bit. My mom had this thing where she would say, and this is the title of my speech actually, she would say, just leave the room better than you found it. Consistently. And she'd say, it doesn't have to be big. Walk through, you see something out of place, pick it up, put it where it goes, and keep going. If it happens miraculously to be clean, do something to make it a little more beautiful. So just make the room better than you found it. Leave the room better than you found it. Repeated over and over and over. If all my siblings were here, you say, what did Mom used to say? You say, leave the room better than you found it. That became a metaphor for me in everything that I was doing and trying to leave this room, Spaceship Earth, a little better than I found it, and trying to make the world a better place for me having been here. I'm going to talk a little bit about how that happened. Oh, here she is, probably 3 weeks before she passed away. She was 62. She looks like she's 82. She was 62 there, same age as my dad. Incredible woman, Misha Davis. And I did all of that without crying. I don't know if that's good or bad, but there we go. Okay, so now a little bit about my story. I've been an entrepreneur for forever. You know, I got started. I got this catalog, a mail order catalog, which was kind of like Costco over the mail. And I bought a tub of red vines when I was probably 10. I had to save up to get enough. Bought a tub of red vines, went to school, sold them for $0.25 a piece or whatever, you know, quadrupled my money, and I thought it was the most amazing thing ever. I'm like, I love this, I'm gonna do more. And I got called into the principal's office. It was a private school. And they asked me to stop. Couldn't sell stuff, et cetera, et cetera. I've been a libertarian ever since. It's my first brush with regulation. Then when I was a little older, I had a lawn mowing business, and I had a soccer game the same time I was supposed to mow somebody's lawn, and so I got a buddy to mow the lawn for me. And then I went and I got the $10 for, you know, doing it, and I gave him the $5, and I kept $5, and I really like this. This is great. I played soccer and made $5. And so then I was the marketing arm of our business and had others do the work. Then in college, by the time I got to college, going through college, I started 3 different companies. Again, this is context leading up to some of the points here. One of them was doing really well. Oh, I forgot one part I want to add. I also served a mission for our church in France, and I worked with a lot of African political refugees who had either left on their own or been kicked out, shown the door of their country. And they were living in like monks' quarters, you know, like 3 feet by 8 feet, little cells in these places in France where they were put up. And I remember one of them told me, he said, Davies, I used to be a big man in my country, drove a Mercedes. I ran the radio station, and when I said something they didn't like, they kicked me out of town. I just realized, oh, you know, the world isn't all like it was for me in comfortable middle-class Davis, California. So then I'm in college now, and my junior year, and here's the part I don't talk about publicly. This is Chatham House rules, right? I had wanted to go to Harvard. I was running a successful business. I was getting good grades. I had cut out a picture of Harvard Business School library and put it on my wall above my desk. You know, that one with the columns and, you know, it looks like a Greek temple. It does, with a New England added bell tower. And I had that on my wall. And then underneath it, I had calligraphied a quote from Spinoza, the philosopher. I wrote, all things excellent are as difficult as they are rare. That was my motivation. And so it's finals my junior year. This company that I'm running is doing really well. It's a translation company. We were doing translation for the employee satisfaction surveys, which sounds really banal, but we're doing it for Pepsi worldwide. It was kind of a big deal. We're doing some work with the 2002 Olympics and some other things. So I thought, okay, I probably have a pretty good shot of going to Harvard, started some businesses, getting good grades, but I'm going to make sure, so I'm studying like crazy during finals, 16 hours a day, literally library open till library closed, living on frozen burritos. 5 days in a row. Those big bags of frozen burritos, I've gone through 2 of those bags. My sister comes and finds me in the library, and she says, either you're going to die or you're not going to be able to go to the bathroom if you keep this up. I'm going to take you to get you some good food. And so we went to this great place near campus, and I still remember exactly, I had a turkey avocado sandwich on homemade bread. That was so good. The bread was so moist, and the turkey was just perfect. And then I had a salad, and the carrots were perfectly crisp, and the ranch was so creamy. I mean, you can imagine after eating 20 burritos or however many I'd eaten in the week, it was sensory overload. I went back to the library, and I was reflecting on that, just feeling deep, deep gratitude to have experienced that compared to the burritos that I'd become used to. And it was expressing gratitude, you know. And then I remembered some of the African refugees that I had worked with, and I thought, they'll never see a meal like that. Even though they're in France now, they'll never see a meal that abundant. And I thought, when I have a lot of money, I'm going to do something about that. And Buddhist friends understand what I'm going to say next. As I was thinking that, I connected to the 2 billion people in the world that were living on less than $2 a day at the time. And I felt in a very deep way their suffering. The mother's fear and anxiety. Is my child going to die in the night? Gosh, I wish I had 50 cents for the medicine. The father's deep fear and deep self-loathing is too strong, but feeling like they'd failed because they didn't know where dinner was going to come the next day. I mean, I felt this. This is all happening in a moment, but I felt it. And I felt it so strongly that it was ludicrous to spend 20 years amassing wealth while these people were feeling this. I laughed out loud in the middle of the library. All these things happened very fast. I laughed out loud. And then, call it what you will, my intuition, God, the universe, something said to me, you can spend your life doing something about it. That's why you have these skills, not just to make a bunch of money. I'm 21 years old. I said, okay, I'll do it. What is it? What do I do? And so I spent the next little while trying to understand, how do I do something about this suffering? I learned about microfinance, and I was enthralled with microfinance. Oh, it's entrepreneurship. It's people helping themselves. They just need a start, a jump start. I got really, really excited about it. So excited that when I graduated, I sold that company, and I went to Mexico to try it, to start my own microcredit program. But what I didn't know was that it was supposed to be done nonprofit. And since it was my money and I didn't want to keep putting money in it, I designed it to break even. So it wouldn't always have to keep getting more and more money. And it worked. And then I had this idea, wait a second. If this is really helping people and we can run it like a business, we could probably finance it like a business. If we could finance it like a business, we could grow it like a business so we can really reach all these people. So I got really excited about that. And then with some colleagues ended up starting a company that did exactly that. So we were the first commercial investors in microfinance. But back then, there were no commercial microfinance companies. Allie knows this story in the history. So does Matthew. A bunch of people in here know this part of the story. And so we had to invent a way of turning nonprofit microcredit companies into for-profit ones so that we could invest in them and get them the capital to grow. So we did that all around the world. And we ended up giving, like the introduction said, that Kevin said, you know, we ended up giving 15 million microloans around the world, $3 billion worth, more than $3 billion worth, because we were able to do it commercially. We didn't know at the time as we were inventing this thing that would later be called impact investing. Like where you actually take investment capital and you invest in a company that somehow is helping people do better and you make money in the process. It was incredible. And I was speaking at hedge fund conferences and speaking on Wall Street, and we were raising hundreds of millions of dollars to do this and deploying the capital and getting awards. Stanford named me an entrepreneurial thought leader. Ernst & Young named me Entrepreneur of the Year. All these things. It was just like, okay, it's taken me 10 years, since I had that whatever happened in the library. It's working. It's working. And then I came back from a trip to India one time. We had investments all around the world, had offices all around the world. I came back from India, and in the middle of the night, woke up as if I had been hit by a train. I'm sweating. My heart is racing. I had to kick the covers off. Oh, man, I was taking Benadryl to help me sleep with a jet lag and still taking the malaria medicine. I thought, there's probably some interaction between those. Whew, gosh, that was not comfortable. Then the next night happens again. The next night, again. 6 nights. Then it starts happening in the day. And then, I'm going to shorten the story a little bit, then all my organs and systems started shutting down. You're like, what, you jumped to that? Yeah. My digestive system shut down. I couldn't digest anything. I had to blend all my food. You think, so imagine the salad that we had. You think, oh, that's like a green smoothie if you blend it. It's not. It's gross. It's really gross. Spaghetti in a blender, not good. My circulatory system was totally off, so that if I were down like this and I stood up quickly, I'd black out and fall over. My psoas muscle, the muscle right here, was constantly, this one on the left side, constantly constricted. I couldn't stand up. It was like this. My heart rate was all over the place. I drove myself to the ER a couple times because I could see my heart like doing this and out of my shirt. And I got chastised, by the way. If that happens, don't drive yourself, they say. Call an ambulance. So 9 doctors. Went to 9 doctors all around the country trying to figure out what was going on as things are getting worse and worse and worse. Finally, doctor number 9 says, good news, bad news. We did a bunch of tests. All of the problems that you're experiencing have to do with cortisol, which regulates everything. And so either your adrenal glands, where cortisol comes from, your adrenal glands either have a tumor on them or they're shrinking and dying, something called Addison's disease. We can do a couple more tests to find out. Turns out it was Addison's disease. My adrenal glands, I'd gotten malaria years before. It wasn't diagnosed. It caused structural damage, and one thing led to another. Eventually, my adrenal glands were just shrinking and dying. We could see it on the MRIs, getting smaller. And so he said, you have probably about 6 weeks left of cortisol to keep you alive. That's kind of the bad news. And the good news is we can fix it. We can fix it 2 different ways. We can give you artificial hormone replacement therapy right now, which means Allie knows something about this because you just grimaced. It will kill your adrenal glands, basically, but that's okay. We can just keep giving it to you, but it's hard to get the dosage right. And so you're going to kind of be like this. Travel will be tough, et cetera. He said, or we can rebuild it. We can rebuild your adrenal glands metabolically, but that takes about 18 months. And I was running 3 companies at the time and traveling and had 3 young kids and everything else. He said, you have to disengage from everything. The environmental toxins, where is she? The environmental toxins and everything else, you have to just live as clean as you can. And so, actually I wasn't planning to tell this part, but I said, I was still super type A entrepreneur. I said, okay, thanks for the advice. I'm going to take 6 weeks off and I'll come back better than ever. I left. I went to a lake house a couple hours from our house and crashed. Slept 16, 18 hours a day, just completely. I had been just keeping myself going through momentum. And so I came crawling back. I'm like, what do I have? You remember that? Remember what's that movie? What is it? Misery? No, it's. Sorry, you're waiting for some catharsis. Good news, I didn't die. There's the punchline. No, it's Doctor Strange. Remember Doctor Strange when he's meeting with the mystic, and he says, oh, some gift shop, and she does all that stuff, and he goes through multi-dimensions, and he comes back, he says, teach me. That's what I felt like. I'm like, okay, what do I do? He explained everything I had to do. Part of that was a very careful diet. Had to go through a bunch of treatments. Cut the story short. You're going to be like, oh, tough life. Okay, here's your catharsis. So we moved to the south of France to go through treatment. Lived there for a year on the Mediterranean. And I was to have no responsibility. Couldn't take the trash out. We started homeschooling, which is a whole other story. We had 3 daughters, homeschooled for about 9 years, starting with this. I want to read something from my journal as I was going through this that I literally haven't shared. I feel embarrassed because of my health. Really embarrassed. This, by the way, this was after I had resigned from the companies I was leading. I walked out of a board meeting, and my wife met me, and I was crying. And I said, this is not how I wanted to leave my baby. I feel embarrassed because of my health, really embarrassed. I feel like I've somehow failed a test, that I wasn't strong enough to do hard things for a long time. I've pushed my body to the limit. Part of this happened because I would just I'd say, one more deal, one more trip, one more, whatever. I would just keep pushing. When I met my wife, I get sick, get a cold or whatever, and just keep going, ignore it, and I'd be sick for 3 weeks. It was totally foreign to me. She would get sick. She'd take 3 days of work off. She'd sleep, eat really well, and then get better. I'm like, what are you doing? Stopping. So I've pushed my body to the limit. Doing physically hard things is a habit, but I've failed somehow. Bill Gates didn't have his body give out. He was able to work hard for a long time. This is before Steve Jobs passed away. Steve Jobs didn't have to retire before he was ready because his body quit. Why am I so weak that I can't finish building a company that's changing the world? Why can't I complete what I feel is my mission on earth? I'm embarrassed to be weaker than other people who have done hard things. I am feeling emotional for a long time and changed the world. I share that. Part of my intention tonight is to offer encouragement and to offer hope and some empathy, because this is hard. The work we do is hard, right? There's a reason you get awards for it. So congratulations. But as I went through like this, I was getting worse and worse and worse, and then bottomed out for a while, and then started getting better. And I was journaling the whole time. In fact, when I got the diagnosis, I pulled out a new notebook, opened the cover, and wrote The Journey Back. So I just wrote and wrote and wrote as I was going through all of this. And I started to learn about healthy ecosystems and what it takes to lead healthy ecosystems, and spent time studying rainforests, and spent some time in a rainforest. So I half joked to myself about calling my rainforest teacher, like my octopus teacher, my rainforest teacher. And I've lost that page. That's okay, I know what I wanted to say anyway. I learned a number of things studying healthy ecosystems and studying in the Amazon with my family. Spent time in the Amazon trying to understand natural systems and how they work, and studying resilience. Studying the resilience of complex systems. Complex systems are interdependent. They're non-linear. They're circular. There's no waste. There's a mother tree. We were talking about trees earlier. There's a mother tree. Everybody heard of mother tree? The concept of a mother tree generally? So they're mother trees that nurture the rest of the forest, et cetera. Those mother trees, by the way, have more extensive root networks and mycelium networks than other trees. They're very connected, and they use those connections to get information, to share information, to warn about predators, to spread around nutrients, et cetera. But here's the point. This ties back to my mom, leave the room better than you found it. In a healthy ecosystem, each member of the ecosystem contributes more than it takes. Each member of the ecosystem is additive and somehow helps. Gives more than it gets. Contributes more than it receives. This is what leads to regenerative. I missed the talk. Somebody gave the talk earlier about regeneration and regenerative practices, not just agriculture, but other practices. This is what leads to this regeneration, right? There's no waste. Everything is contributing more than it takes. And let's see here. I'm going to pause and just show a couple of other pictures. Those are two of my daughters. That was our friend, the crocodile. A friend of mine has a phrase when she's problem solving. She'll say, "That's not the closest alligator to the boat." This is where it comes from. By the way, I took all of these, and I don't consider myself a photographer. These were on an iPhone, just out there. When I started preparing this talk and I started looking for images, I went online and found images, and I thought, no, I'm going to do my own. These are ones that I've taken, so all the ones you'll see are that. So this is a healthy ecosystem. This is one of the most pristine parts of the Amazon rainforest. It's in a national park in Peru. More biodiversity. I think we probably know most of the statistics. More biodiversity, et cetera, there than anywhere else. Look, these are contributing. They're breaking down the tree, the fallen tree. The tree is contributing. They're contributing. They're turning it back into usable nutrients, et cetera. This got me thinking, what do humans contribute to the ecosystem? When we're somewhere, when we're in a forest or somewhere else, like installed there, what do we contribute? Oh, sorry. Then that was Peru. This is Acadia National Park. This is the Tetons, the Grand Tetons. This is Zion in southern Utah, phenomenal. This is the Wasatch National Forest. That was just this fall. But here's what humans contribute. This looks beautiful, doesn't it? Anyone know what it is? It's a coal power plant. This is coal ash. Where do you think that is? Uzbekistan? Yeah, exactly. It's South Carolina. When I saw this, I was mad. I didn't take this picture, actually. I took this picture of a picture. This was on exhibit in the Oxford Museum of Natural History. But I was furious when I thought I was pretty well educated about this kind of thing. And I thought, okay, if that's in the US, maybe that was 1950. No, this was last year. Okay, where's this? We don't need to play guess. This is Germany. What? This is another part of the United States. South Carolina again. So what do we contribute? But then I started asking myself, what do I contribute? And what can I contribute to the ecosystem? Somebody I sat next to at dinner gives offerings to the land where she is frequently. Can we do things like this? So that brings me to my points. One last thing. This was Dubai flying over the United Arab Emirates in October. These are fires burning off of the natural gas, all of these, from the oil rigs. Okay, so with that, here are some thoughts on leadership for regeneration. First is we need to lead different. This is a play on the old Apple thing, think different. Lead different. Top-down leadership isn't going to get us where we need to go. Top-down leadership isn't sufficient for regenerative societies, regenerative capitalism. Those of you who were in Matthew's conversation earlier, if we're going to get there, it's insufficient. It kind of worked post-World War. It kind of works in war. But in today's wars, it doesn't even work anymore, right? It has to be autonomous units out doing things. So top-down doesn't work. In a VUCA world, people know VUCA, V-U-C-A, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That's the world we now live in. Plus, millennials don't buy it. Gen Zs don't buy it, the top-down thing. They're highly, highly collaborative. So we need to change the way we think and the way we lead. Next, we need a flexible, adaptive leadership for complex systems. Difference between complexity and complicated. Ferrari's complicated, right? Lots of moving parts, et cetera. They're all put together. It's kind of complicated how it's put together. Complex is a rainforest. If you take apart a Ferrari, you know what each part does. You know how it interacts with the others. You put it back together, it will work. You take apart a rainforest, it doesn't work that way, right? The power of the system emerges from the interaction between them. We can't solve complex problems, complex system problems, with linear thinking. We have to become systems thinkers. Unfortunately, in most MBAs, we're still teaching kind of linear analytical thinking. Last, connect. So from the rainforest, making connections, lots of connections for data and feedback. Sharing power, distributing power around. Activist leaders are very good at this type of leadership, by the way. If you want to think of, okay, what kind of leadership are we going to need as the economy evolves and society evolves, look at how activists lead, distributing power, et cetera, organized, multi-stakeholder, figuring out who needs what and how to get it. And then experimenting to innovate and adapting. That's that. Next, think beyond. We need to think beyond the first order impact. Matthew, you talked a little bit about this in your talk again. I keep referencing Matthew's because I wasn't feeling great, and that's the only one I went to. Chris's was great too, I hear. I'm sure everybody's was great. But thinking beyond first-order impact, we tend, our investments or our projects tend to solve some human need, usually an economic need, right? But that's about as far as we go. We get really excited about this project, this investment, et cetera. We need to expand it to at least the second order. Second order is systems thinking, systems investing, systems project, looking at the system as a whole, finding the nodes where we can do something, asking ourselves, how does this investment improve the system? Or even better, asking, how can I invest to change the system entirely? A portfolio approach, looking at different things in different parts of the system. Then the third order, if we really want to go big, the third order thinking is planetary. How do we think on a planetary basis? Planetary scale and planetary time. Kind of like donut economics, if you've heard of that, planetary boundaries, thinking about our planetary boundaries. We taught our girls, as part of our ethics, what if everybody did that? Whatever it was. Threw their gum on the ground, picked a flower in a national park, whatever. What if everybody did that? What if everybody did that forever? To help them think through the implications. And we think, oh, when the Pilgrims first came to the United States and saw endless trees and started cutting them down, right? They thought, oh, they're infinite resources. Let's use them. We don't think that anymore, right? Well, when I was in Dubai at this World Economic Forum thing, I was in a small event, Chatham House rules, so I won't say exactly who it was, but somebody was giving a presentation on low orbit satellites. And this was the thinker and the scientist, the techno-scientist behind low orbit satellites. And he said, there's some, or actually I think I asked, I said, I thought there was some transmission loss with these low orbit satellites, isn't that right? And he said, yeah, but now they're so inexpensive to put up that we can just put up a ton of them. This was like 3 months ago that we're still thinking infinite, even in space, infinite resource, right? What about, the buffalo and the blue whales, et cetera? Desalinization sounds fantastic, right? Turns out that within a 50-mile radius, desalinization changes the chemistry of the ocean. So what if everybody did that forever? What happens to our oceans? Or offshore wind. These are all things that we think are good and renewable, right? Offshore wind, right? What happens to, right now, the largest wind farm in the world is being built off the coast, actually not north of us here, Eureka, Northern California. The blades are 2 football fields long, just the blades. They're huge, huge. And they've studied it. This is a really good place to build these because there's a lot of wind. Well, what happens when we have these enormous things changing the wind patterns there? What's that going to do? What's that going to do in Alaska? What's that going to do in Antarctica? What's going to happen? So anyway, just starting to think planetary scale. Okay. Is this going too long? Should I cut some out? Okay, next one. Foster connection. Leadership for systems change and systems building. Foster connection for well-being. We're so disconnected that we either crave it or we're scared of it. Anybody know somebody pretty well, like maybe have a kid or a nephew or something, under the age of 24, not working yet? Anybody have someone in that age? If they have an option to interact with somebody, are they going to do it on the phone or by text? Have you ever said to them, just call? And what happens? They get nervous. They're totally scared. We're so disconnected. So we've got to connect for our well-being and for our sustainability. 3 ways to connect. 3 things, 3 levels of connection. First, self. Self. The world is too much with us late and soon. Anyone know this poem? Right? We don't have time to connect with ourselves. So finding quiet time to connect with ourselves, whatever that means for you. If it's a run, if it's meditation, if it's prayer, if it's yoga, but just finding time to get centered and get grounded. Second, connecting with others, building community. That book, Bowling Alone, was written 20, 25 years ago. The loss of community. It's continuing to happen. There's a fantastic quote from Coretta Scott King. The strength of a community can be measured by the compassionate action of its members, which probably doesn't totally lend itself to online communities, right? I mean, there's something. You can do a nice thing when you hear, oh, sorry about your mom or whatever, but really, truly, deeply compassionate actions require this human connection. And then the last, connecting with nature, finding ways to connect with nature. Forest bathing, have you heard of forest bathing? Some people? Google it, it's amazing. It's actually a prescriptive thing. You can get a prescription for it in Japan and Korea. Oh, you have heart problems? You need to go take a forest bath. What is that? And they tell you, go walk through the forest, you meditate, you think, you pick up a rock, you feel it, et cetera. Well, what happens? Your heart rate goes down, your cholesterol levels go down, everything. Trees, it turns out, trees emit, up to 6 feet high, they emit hormones, like pheromones, that are positive for us and help regulate a number of things in our body. So there's a fantastic John Muir quote I love, says, the clearest way into the universe is through a forest. Okay, this is a relearning. These things I've talked about, they're not rocket science. It might sound new age, hippy-dippy. No, this is pre-enlightenment, right? This is what we knew before the Enlightenment told us that we were separate from nature, separate from each other, that the only things to be trusted were things we could verify with our 5 senses and somebody else could verify with their 5 senses, right? So this is indigenous wisdom that's coming back now. This is, I don't know if we can make up a term, this is post-enlightenment. This is post-reductionist. This is post-Newtonian, right? Because this is quantum. What we're learning about quantum now is quantum is connection through vibration, through harmonious vibration, right? That can be connected across long distances. They used to think it was only very small particles. They're going to find that it's not. We can be quantum connected. We're larger than that. The way you're looking at me, the way you're smiling, everything, this is a connection, right? These are real, these are very, very real things. By the way, side note, things we understand and can explain we call science. Things we don't yet understand we call religion. So a lot of these things that yogis have known forever or shaman have known forever, science is now learning and claiming, but really it's the same thing, different ways of explaining things. This isn't sissy stuff. The soft stuff is the hardest, right? Anybody led a corporate transformation of some sort? The technical stuff, that's relatively easy. The financial stuff, the whatever else, it's the soft stuff. That's the hardest. It's because it's at our core. This is at our core. This one I'll go a little faster, and then we're almost done. More awe, less certainty. Scientifically proven is something we hear all the time. There's no such thing. Science doesn't prove things. It's not set up to prove things. Scientists should be the first to tell us that, but science gets so excited about the things they discover that they think it's actually true. They don't know that it's just the next step, until the next one, until the next one, until the next one. I think we can embrace a much more awesome approach to what we don't know yet, which will allow us to continue to learn and not place our salvation in technoscience. I'm not an anti-science at all. Just the opposite. I just think that we shouldn't rely on it alone. Because how many cigarettes, remember? Doctors used to tell us in the 50s, cigarettes are good for you. Right? You can find, if you Google it, you can find advertisements. 9 out of 10 doctors agree. Smoking smoking makes you thin, or whatever they say. DDT was supposed to be good, safe, scientifically proven to be safe. Asbestos, scientifically proven to be safe. Should we go on opioids? And if we sat here, we could come up with 100 of them. Some vaccines. Did you know there are vaccines that were early polio vaccines were incubated on monkeys, and monkeys had a virus called the simian virus that got into some of those vaccines and got passed down. You know how I found that out? My kids had it. We said, what in the world is this? And the doctor says, oh, simian virus. Yeah, it's because, in the 50s, I said, you're cuckoo. I thought he was crazy. It's on the CDC website. Anyway, we don't need to keep going on them. Just that we can be a little more humble and take a tentative approach to this. Okay, closing. Thanks for staying with me. Thanks for nodding and smiling. I made it through. I only cried on the inside. Let's one breath to finish. In. Hold. Out. Thank you. Keep it with your eyes closed. Ponder this. What did I hear or think or feel that I want to do something about? Just think for a moment. Maybe it came quickly. What's one thing you want to do something different about? Eyes closed still. Ponder this. Who do I want to tell about this? Who am I excited to tell? Or who can help me implement this thing? Who can remind me or help me or coach me or support me? Last one. If you're this type of person and feel so inclined, will you write about that? Will you do something to share it with not just that one person but the world? Write a LinkedIn post, do a TikTok video if that's your thing, whatever. Okay, you can open your eyes. Thank you. This, young people these days say we need to save the planet. I think the planet's going to be fine. It's been through, you count 6 or 7 extinction events in the past. I think it's going to be fine. We might be more appropriate to say, save the humans. I think we're going to be fine too. Not everybody. Miami's going to have some trouble. Unfortunately, the Maldives and some others. But we're going to be okay. I think what we're really talking about is what do we need to do to purposefully design the future that we all want, where the people and the planet thrive. I think that's what we're talking about. Okay, here's my poem. Leave each room better, a worthy goal. Regenerative harmony, each plays a role. Lead different, not from above, but within the throng, where many voices craft a stronger song. Think beyond immediate, foresee the chain, where second and third orders determine the gain. Foster connection, go deep, go wide, to self, to others, to nature's side. In this unity, that's a nod to our theme, in this unity our spirits ignite, and a thriving path for the planet is bright. Thank you.
Real speakers. Real coaches. Real investors. Real companies. No matter your destiny, all roads lead to Real Leaders Unite.